Hello and welcome to the latest Enterprise Europe Network webinar. Today we will be focusing on doing business in the United States. Before I hand over to Yvonne for the moderation of the webinar, I would like to give you some further details about the Enterprise Europe Network and what kind of services we are offering to growth-oriented, innovative businesses and startups in Europe and beyond. So we are quite big elephant, I would say. We are quite big. Almost 4,000 business advisors are working for us. We have around 500 member organizations, or rather partner organizations in Europe and beyond. And we are mostly, I would say, EU funded. So services provided, they are co-funded by the European taxpayer. As regards our services, we help companies to acquire IP and sell IP. So we're helping them to transfer technology. We are providing them advice how to adopt more sustainable business models. We are helping companies to navigate the EU single market. And a very popular service we are offering is on a business partnering. So we're organizing hundreds of business-to-business matchmaking events and company missions every year. In addition to that, our network helps companies or supports European companies to access EU funding, mostly for research and development purposes, but also helping the companies to get investor ready, depending on which stage of development they are. And last but not least, of course, we are helping European companies to expand into new markets. And today we will be focusing on the United States. So much about the Enterprise Europe Network, and I hand now the floor to Yvonne for the moderation of the webinar. Yvonne.
Thank you, Thomas. It's good to be with you, and we are thrilled to be about to renew our contract with the EEN network for our partnership here in the US. And welcome to our audience to today's webinar. My name is Yvonne Bendinger-Rothschild. I'm the Executive Director of the European American Chamber of Commerce in New York. And we've developed this webinar series exclusively for the Enterprise Europe Network in an effort to help them help you with your expansion into the United States and more general about help you do business in the United States successfully. And today's series or starter guide will help you to better understand what you need to think about when you're planning your US expansion strategy. We have put together a panel. With me are Annie Borello-Fiola. She's a partner at Fox Horan Camerini and advises European companies, American companies in doing business on both sides of the Atlantic. She's an attorney registered in the US and in Italy. Speaks, I don't know how many languages, Annie, four, five, well. Something? Don't worry about it. Okay, lots of them. So she can speak with her clients in pretty much all of their mother tongues. We also have Ari Sheen with us. He's the founder of Polyteam, and his team is advising companies in their US expansion. And our workshop will cover a number of different topics. And let's start with the most basic question, which is your company ready for US expansion? Ari, let me start with you. What are some of the baseline things you need to think about when you're asking yourself that question?
Yes, thank you so much, Yvonne. Happy to be here. Pleasure to meet everyone. So I've been doing that for over a decade and a half. Just a little bit of depth and background. Before that, I worked in corporate America for about 2 decades. In the software sector, but mainly on the business aspect of things, with customers ranging from Fortune 50, which is the top echelon, largest companies on the face of the continent, as to all the way to mid-market and below. then in the last decade and a half, it's mainly with emerging tech, emerging companies, much smaller scenarios, nimble, quick, and have to make quick decisions to survive and grow. So my background, as I said, is coming from math and software, but then later on became business and MBA, etc., and so on. One more item to add relevance to my position is the fact that I'm myself have migrated to the US. So I always look and put the cap on of how to look at things from a different lens, understanding where two or more cultures meet, and point of failures and point of success, because just like anything in life, there's pros and cons for everything, and we have to identify the pros so we can actually leverage on them, accelerate, shorten processes, and get the job done the way that emerging tech and emerging company wants to do that. So first of all, congratulations. I assume that everyone sitting here in this room has thoughts, or maybe in the midst of thinking, how do I expand to the US? So why do I say congratulations? Is because you've reached a point probably that makes sense to you to either think about it now or start planning to it in the future. And that shows grit and success in your own home markets probably. And so congratulations reaching that particular position. It's not easy, I'm sure. I've worked a lot with entrepreneurs. To your question, Yvonne, there's a couple of things that I think we can categorize. Some fall into the bucket of whatever any company should consider, right, when they look in the market. And some is more into the fact that somebody's getting across the pond or across the Atlantic, as they say, and start in a new market in an unfamiliar charted territory. So some of those things that are maybe more mundane but now have to be revisited and thought through is the basics. The basics are things, for example, like market product fit, right, and the demand for your product. I'll maybe highlight the topics first. Guidance, even I can drill into some other, maybe a deeper dive into some of those points. But basically, another one for any company is, for example, the go-to-market sales strategy. I'm sure you've thought about it in your own markets, whether it's in your own country or neighboring countries in Europe, etc. Operations, supply chain. How do I, if I have a physical product, I deal a lot with software products or services, which in a way they are free from those considerations to a certain degree. But when you deal with a physical product, you want to consider those operations, supply chain, etc. Then I might throw some examples that are more pertaining to the fact that you're moving to a new territory. For example, regulatory in the target market that might be very much different than your own market. People issues, human capital, talent, organization. Those are things that you already have established in your hometown, but now it's completely different as it relates to new environment. One thing not to forget, crucial, is the resource of financials, because this is an expensive and long-term kind of move. Yes, Yvonne, sorry about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Should I continue?
and those are some of the top categories. I mean, when we're looking at company readiness, we're thinking about
Yes.
we're also thinking about do you have the staffing on the ground in Europe to support another branch in another country? Do you have
Right.
the support that you need? And then I always say the famous Amazon example. What if you actually have you start a new market and then you get like 1,000 orders? Can you support them? Do you have and you said do you have the staff? Do you have the supply chain? Have you thought through the production capabilities that you need in order to facilitate sales in another country if it's a product? Or do you have the staffing, the back office, to facilitate advisory services in another country? And but you also mentioned a very important point, which is the product ready for another market? Which I
Right.
think is
And
very
so,
important.
yes, so I'm a little bit of an entrepreneurial at heart, and I think that we entrepreneurs are all addicts, optimistics, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't be here doing that. So, in my mind, in my book, obviously, your very valid point is, hey, can I manage overflow of orders that will, beyond my ability? I call it a good problem. But nevertheless, it is a problem that needs to be addressed. But for that, in general, in those type of moves and any big step in any business, I would say I much prefer to crawl, walk, run type of approach.
Mm.
So if that is a risk, which could be identified up front, then there are different ways to mitigate that risk by restriction of either a class of customers or a geography, etc. So yes, if that is a risk, one should think about it, because the last thing that you want to do, and we all talk about the few seconds of first impression in today's business life. We don't want to miss the first impression and leave the customer base with bad taste that will not get them back to us. So you're absolutely right. If we can plan for such risks, analyze them, and try to test markets to see how fast things will catch up, then we can, of course, mitigate that by different ways. So I was
Yeah.
also mentioning in general, and I want to just throw it out there, any cultural and communication adaptation is a big thing. So I don't know if you have that for later on in this discussion, Yvonne, or if you want me to drill into that. But those are the highlights. I was just trying to kind of set the stage. I actually walk around with a template of, is your company ready? Please mark it low, medium, high, so the executive team can first and foremost start to assess all those topics, and then we can drill down into each, let's say, silo to see how well is it ready, what are the risks, and how can it be mitigated. Because I've done it more than once, and I'm a kind of like operating for the last decade and a half as a consultant. And so at the end of the day, those are the tools that you bring to the table in order to create some order and not walk into chaos and not know what's going to happen.
And I think that's really the key sentence. Create a structure. I mean, so what are we talking about? Just to sum up, this item: internal resources. Define the motivation why you're going overseas, what you're trying to accomplish. Because if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, you can't measure against it. And then identify the strategic fit. And with the strategic fit, what I mean by that is also the cultural fit. And if you have, make sure, that's what I heard from you, that you have the dynamism on your side, on your team, to deal with, I almost said unintended consequences, but deal with whatever comes your way when you're doing business in another culture. I mean, not that the U.S. culture is that different, but it is different. And you need to be able to deal with whatever presents itself in front of your eyes. I want to hear from Annie for a minute on that. Do you have some examples? I mean, you're dealing with a lot of different companies, in their expansion. Do you have some examples that you could share? What you've seen when companies expand, and what is working particularly well, and what wasn't working so well?
Well, it's it's a big question. I just wanted to pick up a little bit on what Ari said, because Ari said, I'm an entrepreneur and I have an entrepreneurial spirit, so I'm an optimist. And that brought to me, to my mind, a very, very important issue that that is really the leitmotif of the relationship usually between my client and me. And obviously the center of that is trust. In the moment you decide to expand, you have to understand that there are things you know, things you don't know. And the relationship between a lawyer and a client, a big part of it is that usually the client, most of my clients are the owner of companies as well as the manager of the company. In my practice, I do have two or three listed companies, but most of the companies I represent are family owned or family controlled businesses. So usually my way of being a lawyer is with a view to the long term, because I represent the company, but I represent the family that controls it. And there are many issues when a company considers expansion, and you have to be ready. There are a lot of risks. There are a lot of dangers. You need serious resources, because one of the cultural differences between, for example, Europe and the United States is that in the United States, everything is very expensive. The moment you budget correctly, though, there is also, you were mentioning, Yvonne, the risk, quote, of getting an exponential amount of orders that all of a sudden you have to fulfill, because this is the first approach you have to the market, so you cannot ruin your reputation by not fulfilling orders and fulfilling the expectations you have created in the market and the promises you have made. So all these things are scary. On the other end, in nowadays world, a company also has to consider, yes, whether they can afford an expansion, but it's also, many companies don't consider that they also have to consider whether they can afford not to expand, because expansion can be one way to hedge your bets and to diversify your risks. We all saw what happened during COVID, and you know, certain companies were in great trouble. Certain companies managed to keep certain branch more active than others, and this way they could fulfill the dramatic downside that hit them in some areas. I'm originally from Italy, so obviously Italy has been the epicenter of COVID, and for a number of time I had many situations, for example, where the mother company was paralyzed and the branch in America could still work, because even though we had COVID, the regulations here were much more loose. And this, in certain situations, saved the company, because the company in Italy would have gone bankrupt if they hadn't expanded to the US. So you have to consider expansion. All you said is important to know what you want to achieve when you expand. Sometimes you're not really sure. Sometimes, like, entrepreneurs have great enthusiasm and they see, you know, the good entrepreneurs see possibilities everywhere. Everywhere where normal people see problems, entrepreneurs see opportunity. Now, the difficult part in my job, for example, when I work with my client, is that usually I have to be the person who raises the problem, because a good lawyer is a person who sees as many problems as possible so that you can transform them into unknown risks, into budgeted potential risks that you take into consideration and foresee, so that you know how to avoid them, or you know how to face them when you cannot avoid them. So what I saw, I couldn't say I saw everything, but I certainly saw very, very different styles. And I saw situations where I thought the client was not going to make it, and instead they made it. And I saw situations where they budgeted correctly and they had a very good organization, but then at the end of the day, they didn't have what you mentioned, the staff ready to support the operation in the States. So one of the biggest frustration where you try to assist a client is, which translates also into a cost issue. When you ask, you need to be informed. You have to have a continuous flow of information, because usually when you assist a client, when I assist a client in their first approach to US market, in many cases, their first office is my office. In many cases, when they do an audit, they call me. and I'm really the face of the client in the initial stage. But I can do that well only if I have someone in Italy or in France or in South America. My clients are probably half South American and half European now. I have to have someone who immediately answer my questions. And sometimes I'm on the call with the auditor and I have my my WhatsApp open with the client so that I can provide immediate answer, and we fulfill all the requirements by law and regulations that even if the client is not in New York or is not in the States. So communication with the client and having staff in Italy, in South America, in France, in Germany, in Turkey, ready to answer all the questions is fundamental. And it also reduces cost, because when I try to explain that to the client, when the clients immediately ask for a budget, and now that I'm a little bit older than than I used to be, I used to give estimates of what my fees would be. Now I realize that the moment you give estimate, the client all of a sudden, from writing you 2 emails a day, starts writing you 30 emails a day. And you send an email asking for the information, and then you have to send other 5 emails re-asking for the very same information, or you receive only partial information. So all this there is a big, even a company that is budgeted correctly, but doesn't have the support staff that is organized to understand that when a lawyer sends you an email, you have to be careful to answer properly and possibly in 1 email rather than 27. And that's going to be more effective, you don't create confusion, and less expensive for you, because obviously the lawyer doesn't have to go back and spend 5 hours sorting through emails or sending new emails asking for information and things like that. So having staff in place is very important. But on the other end, most of the clients who fail or at least don't reach the results that we're hoping for, or are slower at reaching them, are clients who don't budget properly. America is very expensive, but once you start, America can also bring you exponential success, exponential sales, but also exponential problems. So yes, the structure has to be problem. I saw clients who budgeted well, were very well organized. I have a German client who is always on the spot. I get an answer not within the day, within 2 hours to every question, and I can serve them very well. And I love to work that way. I also saw
If I may
clients.
jump in for a second, and we're going to get to the financial resources in a minute. So what I'm hearing from you is cultural adaptation. It's coming back as a topic. Seeing the problem, but developing the flexibility to deal with it. Because
It's essential.
It's really essential. And as a German, we see the problem and then we say, can't do this, can't do that. Can't do is not an option when you're expanding. I personally think that can't do is even an option when you're an entrepreneur. Doing business anywhere and you have a can do attitude, it's just not working. But what I'm also hearing from you is, you're dealing with family run companies or with entrepreneurs, and maybe Ari, you want to comment on that also in a second. They run their business. They know what they're doing. They think they have the answers to every question, but they need, when they're going someplace where there are unknowns, they need to find someone like an attorney or an accountant initially, or whoever the advisor is, whom they trust, where they don't say, yeah, Annie, I really know this better than you. And let's do it like they do it in France, or let's do it like we do it in Italy. And I know better. I'm hearing from you that if you go and hire an advisor or work with an advisor, trust the help you're getting. If you don't trust the advisor, get another one. And you're asking for help, and you're asking for an advisor to get advice, not to give advice or know better.
If I may say
I think that
something,
it's essential. Yeah.
Just because it's really to this point, what I often tell to the people I train in the profession is that law is my field. So although I like to participate in the business of the client, but it's an art, it's not a science. And like we talk about chemistry in personal relationship, in romantic relationship, I believe very strongly in chemistry in professional relationship, especially, going back to the question of trust, which is absolutely key. And that's why this is the next best thing. But I was telling Ari yesterday, I really believe in personal meetings with clients, because I do think that when clients need to know you and need to trust you, but they also need to like your style. They need to understand your style and like your style, because it's especially a company who starts in the States, you are their face for in the first period. So you need to develop this strong relationship. The client can no longer speak to their friends, and we'll go into that later, but not take the advice of your friend who went to America. You have to take your own advice from your own advisor, and your own advisor needs to a certain extent adapt to your style, but also guide you, obviously. And it happened to me to have situation where the client wanted something and I said, no, this is probably not what you want here. Why? Well, because of that and that and that reason. And I said, well, in America things work this way. And I have more than once received the answer like, oh, it's impossible that in a modern system like America things work this way. and it has come to the point where cultural translation is a very, very big part of my job. It's also a part that I take a great pride and also fun in. And it helps me a lot to come from a civil law system, because when I have to teach a French, an Italian, a German how to move in America, and they think that the certain things of the system are absurd, the first thought they have is that I didn't really understand what they meant. So I have to show them that I understood perfectly well what they meant, and that I'm actually extremely familiar with what they meant, and I'm a professional qualified to practice law there too. And only because I can show them that I understand what they're talking about, then they can trust me to tell them, listen, what you want and you would do in Italy, in France, in Germany, in Spain, this way. In America, you have to do it this other way. And this is what you achieve, the result you achieve that you would achieve in Italy, Spain, France, and Germany by doing this other thing. It's important, but the time spent at the beginning to get to know your advisor, to get to know whether you like to work with your advisor, whether you like the style of your advisor. There are certain, and again, I have worked with very different clients, very different attitudes. Usually Italians have dramatically different attitudes from Germans. I work well with both, but it's very important to invest sometimes at the beginning in getting to know your client and getting to know your advisor. And then, the trust is developed. It's not an immediate thing. Chemistry can be pretty immediate. Trust is not immediate. But then once you trust a person, then you really work well, because you feel that you have a person who really has your interest at heart there where you cannot be, at least at the beginning. And you were asking me, giving me examples. The example, again, I mentioned before, I have perfect German client who answers immediately, very structured, too structured, because then the flexibility is a little bit lacking there. I have Italian clients. One perfect example I have that you were asking is a client who told me, my budget is X. We don't have a structure. We're not really sure where we want to be. We have a fantastic product, which we know inside and out, and we know how to train people to use it, and we know that it's right for the American market. And I was very worried that they were going to fail, because they started, I was the face of their company for a very long time. They didn't have an office for a very long time. And the head of the company, who was also an engineer, used to come, travel with 2 suitcases, install the product, train the people to use it. They were and are fantastic at adapting the product to the chain of production of each client in the US. And with this very unusual model that I honestly thought was going to fail, but they were very determined, very capable, very extremely hardworking. They started that way, under budgeted and underfunded. Now they have $1 million business, and this is in America. And the business in America has become bigger than the business in Italy. Now, this is not the usual example. In this case, with hard work, with exceptional quality of the product, and they were ready from Italy to jump on a plane the very same day there was a problem and be in America the following day. Not everybody can do that, but with their flexibility, their determination, their hard work, they made up for what was less than ideal in their business plans. There are other clients who have a better structure and a better funding, and with their better systematic structure, they make up for what they don't have in terms of flexibility and immediate reaction.
Yeah, I want to jump in for a second, and we're going to skip financial and put it on to a later point, because I think we're onto something here. Staffing and leadership. Really leaning in, having somebody in Europe who can deal with the advisor, who can deal with potential clients, who is really putting their foot forward and engaging with this new market opportunity, or the new market you're trying to enter, and having somebody who's answering questions, and not, I mean, my pet peeve is, if you don't know, I don't hear from you. Just tell people, I don't know, I'm going to get back to you, I will find out if there's an answer to that question. But Ari, do you want to talk a little bit about identifying areas where you need external support? What can be managed from Europe? What needs to be managed on the ground by either an advisor or by a consultant or whatever? Someone at a short-term hire that you're bringing in. Can you address that a little bit?
I'll be happy to. Thank you. I just, before I go there, I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. First of all, Annie obviously is a very unique attorney that does, being the pivot or the center of the hub. I usually come across the scenarios where this is indeed the need of the business, right? I mean, I agree with everything that was said about the trust building, which we live in an age of instant, messages flying across the world with 2 sub-second via WhatsApp and stuff like that. But trust, which is human weakest or let's say slowest link, there's no way to accelerate that. Somebody has to build it, somebody has to prove it, and that was always has been my approach. Because at the end of the day, when I work with Europeans, I also work with Southeast Asia companies from Korea, Japan, and so on for the last 15 years, etc. At the end of the day, the smaller step approach is the good one for me, because that's the way to show that they can trust. I'm, at the end of the day, have to become their fiduciary to do all those things. I usually get the request of saying, oh, we need an attorney for this, we need an attorney for that, we need a CPA, we need a regulatory guy. Half my practice is around medical, healthcare, life science. So there's a lot of issues there. Or we need to find the right channels to get this product into hospitals across the United States, etc. So I'm very familiar with that job of being the hub and then activate the spokes. The speed of execution, or the shortcut that people like us, like Annie, myself, and others that are here on the ground, is the fact that at least we have, and I'm going to come back to your point, Yvonne, by via the next statement, is the fact that, look, at the end of the day, we all try to shorten processes, right? I mean, we cannot, okay, one hand, we cannot speed up the trust, we cannot speed this up. But on the other hand, we definitely, that is the success of today, right? Time is everything. Time to market and time to penetrate and enlarging the footprint here in the US in terms of whatever your market services are. So we are basically bringing to the table, people like us, the at least half of the equation, because I already have the trust and the openness and the direct communication, quick one, with all those other tools that I have in my bag that I've been accumulating and building those relationships for so many decades. So when I have a client, they immediately benefit, as I'm sure that it's the case with Annie, they immediately benefit from the ecosystem that we've built to ourselves in order to service that need when the time comes. So, and to your point, Annie, with the beachhead conquer of specific, like a company that says, oh, they can come. This is fantastic to, each company has different stages in the growth, right? So at the beginning, if you're fresh new, obviously you have to do the SWAT team, the special forces, the how to do things right, fast and efficient. And if that calls for somebody to be ready in Italy to hop in a plane with a suitcase to ensure that the first customer out of the first 5 customers getting their attention, this is fantastic. This is exactly what we need, what's
Mm.
needed to be done. Then later on, of
So
course, comes
that's what I meant with
the scaling.
being dynamic, no? Having
Right.
making sure that your team, that you not maybe the entire team, but that you have somebody in the home market who makes sure that you have the answers, and if you don't have them, you get them. You get there. You're flexible. You have the
Yes.
necessary flexibility, and you flex it. You need you any can flex. The owner of that Italian company, the Italian company owner needs to bring the flexibility, him or herself. And I want to
Right. If the
comment
goal,
on
if
something before you get back to that. What I think, and Annie also identified that you don't have to, Americanize your approach, or wherever you're going, Latin Americanize or Africanize or whatever the approach to a market. You can bring a whole lot of your personality into the process, and that will come across really well, because everywhere you go, you're dealing with people, and your people and their people, and you connect people to people. We're not all robots, like the Italians are all the same, the Americans are all the same, etc. But back to you,
so I changed.
Ari, on the.
Well,
Yeah. No,
let me
thank
just
you.
make one remark on Ari, what Ari said. I totally agree that at the beginning, small steps are a great thing, and going slow is important. But I think it's also important for the client to understand that usually the time spent going slow at the beginning is going to allow the building of trust, like Ari was said, but also is going to allow you to go fast afterwards. So if you start slow, then you can really go fast, because then the 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 understanding between the professional and the client is such that you really, in very few words, you really understand each other, you know how to intervene, you know how to serve them well, and is actually fun to help clients this way. Is a lot of fun, because you almost feel that the company is yours, and they understand that, they feel that. And this is built slowly and then allows you to go fast afterwards. So going slowly at the beginning doesn't necessarily slow you down. It actually allows you to go very fast afterwards. Sorry.
Absolutely, absolutely, and also measured on the stage where the company is. I mean, you cannot rely on the type of approach. You can rely on a certain approach for the first 15 customers. Then you have to change your approach for the next 100 customers. Then you have to change your approach. It's all about scaling and market. So I kind of changed the background of my screen for a second, because this is something that I go with some of my customers to understand if there's a fit, first of all, first and foremost, between myself and the company that I need to help. I want to see that our values, our culture is the same. And I can be that fiduciary, responsible party, feet on the boots on the ground, as they call it here, for that early penetration. Then we have to kind of start honing in on the different things of the strategy, the vision, execution, and so on. So now I'm going back to Yvonne's question and saying, okay, so how do we divide that between what's being done at headquarter mothership in the country that there are, and on the ground? I would say, first and foremost, the vision line, stuff between strategy to tactics, right? I mean, strategy has to be, let's say, agreed upon, acceptable by the ownership and the mothership, or the headquarter, wherever that is. And if there are things to correct that, that should be discussed in very great details. But it does not require any boots on the ground in the United States for creation of that strategy. And in order to create that strategy, one would say, well, research of the market is the things that we discussed in the first few minutes of the discussion, right? Market research, understanding how do we look at the competitive landscape, who's our threats. It's not only who we are going to help, but who is going to get hurt when we show up in the market, because those people will be our biggest opponents, right? They'll do everything in order to get us out of here. For example, I remember back in the day, I was working with a big, what's the name of this large French sporting goods that is like triathlon, but something, Catalan,
Decathlon.
Decathlon. They had, for example, a couple of trials to get into the United States. I think they had a wonderful value proposition, right? But they were going to start eating lunch of other entities, and those, entities that were sporting goods and Big Five and stuff like that. They just did everything and anything in order to keep them out of the market. So it's not only where you're going to get gain, but who you're going to eat their lunch for. So those are the things. Then the shift is to the tactical, the execution. And the tactical execution, every point where you build on relationships with your customers here, I would propose heavy injection of localization and on the ground involvement. Meaning, if you touch a lot your suppliers, if you touch a lot your vendors, if you touch a lot your customers, it is going to benefit you for whatever reason. And again, generalities don't hold all the time, every time. I'm using a generality here, generalization. But if you ask me to say, hey, Ari, look at your experience of the last few decades and tell us, so it's more likely than not that those functions, if they're on the ground here, they are being Americanized. And I'll talk about that in a second. You'll have a better, faster relationship with your markets. Now, I'm with Yvonne. It doesn't have to be that you're, God forbid, hide your identity. That's not the issue at all. As a matter of fact, it should be a point of differentiation. But what can I say? At the end of the day, for some reason, I think that people prefer, and for business reasons, justify to themselves that it's better to do business with locals, because people are still set in the ways of, oh, if that's local, he understands me better, he can treat me better, he can fix problems faster, I don't have to explain to them. So anything that touches those circles should be, in my mind, at least kind of leaning towards local folks and personnel. Now,
Yeah.
ratios,
I mean,
you
because
obviously will bring in people you'll bring in executives at one point or another. If the company grows and develops as we all think it will be, then you will bring in people from the home country to oversee, to hire level, to oversee people. And I would say that there's some sort of a magic ratio, which I don't want to name just without anything, but of those kind of like ratio between people that you have to move here to a ratio of people that you should, for your benefit, hire and bring on board from within this culture, from within this country.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the thing is also, I mean, what we skipped a little bit, and just in the interest of time, because we only have 15 minutes left, what I wanted to add to a market entry strategy is think about, do you need to have a subsidiary? Do you want to form partnerships, and work with a subcontractor or license your product? And you need to really think through how you're going to tackle that market. Are you sending production overseas? What does that entail? And really think about, in those conversations where you're going, where you're meeting potential clients, where you're having this dialogue with potential clients, think it through, take this back to your own management team, think through, okay, so, is it a software product? Can we manage this from here? Do we need a subsidiary? If we need a subsidiary, what should the structure look like? And I want to address that, very high level, Annie, if you can. And then I do want to address, financial resources, because there are financial resources you can bring, but there are also financial resources if you decide to set up a subsidiary in the United States that you can tap into. So let's talk a little bit about legal considerations, very high level, because we have 15 minutes left, that you should consider when doing business in the U.S.
Yes, of course. Well, one of my, perhaps my first consideration when a client comes to see me to face the American market is to address how important it is to protect the assets of the motherland, let's say. Usually these are clients who have built with some effort a successful business, large, small, whatever it is, but it's a successful business. And the last thing that they want to see, obviously, is to try to make an attempt of expansion and lose their shirt. So in most cases, if the client only wants to sell products, maybe it's not necessary to have a subsidiary in the United States, but in 90% of the cases, if not more, my advice is to set up a subsidiary. Why? Because, which is not a branch. There is a big difference between branch and subsidiary. A branch can help distribute, but doesn't create any legal protection, because whatever is done through a branch of the company, of the foreign company, exposes the foreign company to liability. If you create a subsidiary essentially means that you create a local company. If you create it properly, because obviously that has to be done properly, and we go back to the concept of trust in your advisors. If you create it properly, you can isolate, if not all liabilities, a good amount of liability. Thus, and why do I say create it properly? Because to give an example, because this thing, we are just in a conversation, what is called in America 10,000 feet view, which is a very, very general, big picture kind of view of the problem. Sometimes some anecdote can help. More than once, I had a client coming to my office saying, smart businessman who build businesses from zero, know very well, had success, and as you were mentioning before, Yvonne, they think they know it all, and they think they only need you to do exactly what they tell you, which I can do. It's easier for me to do that and build them. It's less fun, but it's easier and is more profitable, actually. But the problem is that when the client comes to you, it happens to me often. Good morning, Ms. Borello, I need an LLC. I said, oh, wonderful. Why do you need an LLC? Well, because I want to do business in the United States. Okay, well, this is a very good idea. And who told you you need an LLC? The answer are usually of two kinds. One, which is the most amusing, is like, my best friend was talking to me this summer. He had an LLC for 10 years. The LLC never gave him any problem. They are doing wonderfully. I want my own LLC. And at that point, you don't want to contradict someone who is very smart, who is in front of you and, trust you enough to come and expose to him, to you, your business. But I have to say, the fact that your friend has not been caught doesn't mean that he will never have any problems. And not having any problems, we don't know. Let's examine why you want an LLC. And many times the second answer is, well, we are discussing business with an American company and they want to do it through an LLC. So, well, I understand very well why an American wants to do it through an LLC, because usually if you are a taxpayer in America and a resident in America, an LLC allows you a certain flexibility from the point of view of how you deduct cost, investments, and so on and so forth. And you can also deduct your losses against other income that you have. So obviously, in most cases, an American business or an American investor would want to do business through an LLC. But a foreign resident who is not a taxpayer of the United States, in most cases, doesn't want an LLC. Why don't they want an LLC? Well, one of the very simple reasons is because an LLC has the default LLC, and then there are exceptions, there are check the box, and there are other solutions, but we don't have time for that. But the typical structure of the LLC is based upon fiscal transparency, tax transparency, which means that all the investments, all the revenues of the LLC, all the cost of the LLC, all the expenses are actually attributed directly to the owner of the LLC. This is wonderful for an American resident or an American taxpayer because they can deduct cost against other income. And especially at the beginning, usually a business has more cost than income. However, for a foreign resident, that means that you have to start presenting tax returns in the United States, which if you had a corporation, you wouldn't need to do because the corporation itself presents tax returns in the United States. And there's nothing wrong in presenting tax returns in the United States, and you have nothing to, my clients generally, not generally, all of my clients, as far as I know, have nothing to hide. But it's not a question of having something to hide. It's a question that if you enter into the radar of the IRS, many things can happen. They can be hacked and all your records get, someone get exposure to people you don't want to have exposure. Or there can be mistakes. Or, the cost of presenting a tax returns in the United States is a cost, which if you can avoid every cost, even the smallest cost, if you can avoid it, it's better to avoid it. Doesn't matter how much is the budget of the client. If I can avoid a cost for my client, I will avoid it. Is much more, you might not want to bring the money back. You might not want to have the owner of LLC receive the income. There are many reasons why having a corporation here can isolate your liabilities and all your exposures in the United States, so that whatever the success you obtain in your own country, Greece, Italy, France, Spain, Germany, Turkey, wherever it is, you want to preserve that success and you want to put at risk only the resources that you have budgeted to put at risk for the expansion in the United States. And that's usually my first and foremost concern for the first meeting the client that I have with the client comes to the United States. I understand you have to put at risk a certain amount of money because this is the budget you have to start a business here. Let's do it as carefully as possible, but the risk is impossible to avoid once you have an entrepreneur. But let's not expose to risk other resources that you have that you're not willing to expose to risk. And obviously, the proper legal structure is very important. However, the LLC might not be the right thing. The corporation might not be the right thing. It depends on the business. It depends what is the relationship we have with US partners. Probably most of my clients don't really have a US partner. They just have US clients, and that's a different situation. Another issue.
If I may jump in for a second, I think what's worthwhile mentioning in this context is also what kind of the US structure depends on so many different aspects.
Absolutely.
If you get funding, and may that be funding from the European Commission. I mean, ESMA has a accelerator that provides funding for SMEs. There is Horizon Europe funding. There is venture capital and angel investors. Where that investor sits or where the funding is originating, that's where your company needs to be. Because there are some exceptions, but you need to really think through where I have a company right now who is looking for funding to expand their company into the US. No angel investor in California or wherever they may be sitting is going to give you money for your expansion into the US market. They give you money for research, they give you money for product development, they give you all kind of money, but this is not the right approach to it. You can raise money from BPI or in France or some organization, but you need to raise the money for the right thing. The other thing that I'm seeing is visa issues. So you're successfully opening a branch or a subsidiary or whatever it may be, Inc., LLC, whatever it may be. You're starting a company, fantastic. You need to bring somebody over. Depending on your company structure, you have visa considerations that may be helpful, but others may be getting into the way of you sending executives over. If you want L visas, transfer visas, which is an easy visa to get, the company in Europe has to, or you have, the executive that you're sending has to have worked for the company in Europe for at least 2 years. So if you're a 1-year-old company, you're not going to be able to transfer somebody on an L visa. Then you look at other visas, e-visas. There are certain, factors that that play into that in order, that are directly connected with you setting up the company.
Let me interject here, if you allow, Yvonne. The consideration that you're very correct in what you're saying. The considerations that you have to set up a business in the United States might change if you need to sponsor a visa. Because, for example, the requirement of funding for the setup of an American company is symbolic, essentially, is nothing. But if you need to bring visas, I used to use an immigration company to get visas for my entrepreneurs, and then at some point I realized that if the visa application failed, this entire business plan would fail. So I started to do visa for my entrepreneurs myself, and I don't do immigration visa for outside clients, but for my companies and my clients, I do the visa myself, because I mean, it's not that I'm perfect or magic, but I know that I can do everything I can to do everything possible to obtain the visa. An L visa used to be easy. Now, in the current situation, no visa is easy. Not even a student visa is easy, as we all heard from and read in the newspapers. So if you need to have a visa for an entrepreneur, you have to plan in advance. You need to set up the business plan and budget to be able to show to the USCIS, which is the visa agency, essentially the Department of State, that you can support paying the salary of a person who comes to the United States, and that the company is solid enough for this kind of thing. So many times you cannot just take the advice of your friend on the beach who had an LLC who never gave a problem for 10 years, because you need a custom-made, a tailor-made, Savile Row tailor-made suit to be successful in the United States. And the more time and resources you spend in planning that well, and in making every single piece of the puzzle work perfectly together, the more likely you're going to be to succeed and to be fast at expanding in the later stage. So another issue that this is probably to be left for another seminar: trademark, registration of intellectual property in the States.
Yeah.
There are many things that need to be done in order to have a business succeed in the United States. And as you were saying, as Ari was saying, a lot of the preparation work can be done before starting paying rent for an office in the United States.
And I want to say one more word about regulation, and then we're getting to leveraging networks. The other regulation is also, if you're bringing medical devices into the United States, or medical related products, even if it's software, there are privacy issues to be considered, there are technical issues to be considered. You need to be on top of the regulation. You can probably have your European lawyer do that in some cases, and get advice on some very basic information, but you need to hire somebody on the ground who is really on top of the regulation and who can advise you on the possible pitfalls. That is really essential, because you can be setting up, you can be talking to clients, and then at the last minute, you see that your whatever you're selling is has to get approval from insurance and other issues, and that can sink your entire business plan because you didn't know how to ask the right questions. And the thing is, especially it's like I hear a lot from Europeans who say, I don't want to hire a lawyer. You know what? That's really the worst thing you can do coming to the United States. And you don't need to hire, the most expensive law firm, but there is a cost of doing business, and there's a cost of doing business moving to France. There is no market that you can just walk in and hope for the best. I mean, that is just not possible anywhere in the world. And if you get advice, you know, at a reasonable fee, you're going to save yourself from a lot of headaches. But I
Well,
want to, before we,
that is more the problem. I mean, so many times when the clients come to you with a problem, it's going to be much more expensive to fix it than if the client came to you to plan properly to avoid the problem.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
So not hiring a lawyer sometimes is much more expensive than hiring a lawyer.
For sure.
Lawyers in America are expensive, like everything else, and particularly expensive. But the problem that happen when you don't hire a lawyer usually are much
Even
more expensive.
Leveraging networks and resources for a successful launch. 5 minutes left. Ari, tapping into networks, building a network, tapping into a network. What is your recommendation?
It's absolutely very crucial, this topic, because as I said at the beginning, this really where you can shorten processes, have a big, bottom line, what I think, pick carefully the person that you work on the ground. For this, there's no question asked. Network to develop takes time. Don't expect if you send an executive over after the first month that they figure out where to sit, where to put where they put the kids into school, where to situate themselves, and so on, that they'll be able to know anyone. That is really taking months, if not years. I've been doing it for 2 decades. As a matter of fact, the secret, okay, I can share something that really worked well for me, for example. So in the last 20 years, I myself created 4 different network systems. In other words, where people come to hang in my networking events. So if you're doing it right, I'm not suggesting any business from Europe to do that, because you don't need that. You just need to partner with the right person that has that reach, because that opens doors left and right, create long-term relationships, and as for me, was able to come to the table for on behalf of my, let's say, clients today and in the future, and bring in tens, if not more, of very qualified, vetted professionals for any type of business challenge that they need and have. So the human touch, the relationship, this is definitely something for on the ground here. There's so much nuance and in chats, in creating human relationships, human touch, that just get lost when it's being done from a new person that just arrived from a different culture. It takes time. That's the bottom line. So use for that, absolutely, this is a par excellence example. Use somebody that you already have trust and with, that you develop as their trusted advisor on the ground here, and expect or demand, actually, even that person is so well connected that they can bring in their Rolodex or contact list to the table.
Yeah,
If
I mean,
if I may,
it's a little bit self-serving, but that's what an EACC does,
Yes.
or any other chamber of commerce, for that matter. You know, we provide an environment where you can meet other people, but it doesn't even have to go through a professional organization like ours. You know, organize a dinner party, attend dinner parties, put yourself out there. There's a you know, there's a networking event, you know, in your building, whatever it is, put yourself out there. It's, you know, you're not going to meet people when you're sitting at home. I mean, that is just delusional. That is not happening.
well, if I may say something, I didn't give a presentation of myself. Yvonne was very generous in giving just a few lines. One thing that my client like a lot, talking about trust, talking about feet on the ground, is that usually in July I am in Europe. Last year I was in Spain. This year I'm going to be in Italy. And maybe, I don't know, Yvonne, if you will put up our contacts or you will spread our contacts. Yeah. If any, from Europe, I can easily fly. I will be in Milan at the beginning of July. I will probably be in Rome later. But I'm very happy to organize a meeting if you're thinking of expanding in the US, if you could appreciate meeting with me, getting some ideas, giving me some details about your company, with no obligations. But again, I believe very much that meeting a person, discussing your own specialized things, and what my firm does well is to prepare custom solution for a specific business plan. So I will be happy to meet you. I will be all July. I'm going to be in Europe. I will be in Greece actually at the end of August. So very happy. Feel free to reach out to me and to insist if I don't respond immediately, because maybe I have 1,000 emails a day. But that's, the last thing I wanted to say.
Very good. So thank you, everyone. So key takeaways. Preparation is critical. Spend some time in research, get an understanding of the regulatory environment and local adaptation. Customer focus, engage the US stakeholders early and often, and have a plan. I mean, really formulate a plan. It doesn't have to be, don't overthink it. It could be a list of things you're trying to do. By the end of the month, I want to have accomplished ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. And don't overthink it. I mean, it doesn't have to be developed by a consulting firm. As the entrepreneur, as the owner of the company, some basic milestones, put it on a piece of paper. Flexibility. Be ready to adjust. Have your staff ready to adjust. Assign somebody who can help wiggle your way into another market. Compliance. Don't underestimate the complexity of US regulations, and get help on that. That might be employment if you're hiring people. That might be renting an office space. There are all kind of small issues. This can all be overcome. Millions of companies have overcome this and dealt with this before. You can do it too, but you need to ask. Don't think you know everything. Ask the questions. People, and that's one of the things that I really have to say as a European coming to the United States. People are so helpful. Everybody wants to help you. I mean, you will not find somebody who's not going to help you when you ask them a question. I mean, this is an American thing. I don't know if it's an American thing, but people want to help. People want to engage with you as a person. Measure. Have a plan. Check on execution. Are you on track? Are you not on track? Why you're not on track? It's, just kind of like floating in, hoping for the best, isn't going to work. And then really leverage the networks. I mean, I can't say it often enough. Put yourself out there, meet people. I mean, it's like I have a member coming in, and that's just like a random example, but he's a Dutch lawyer. He's coming to the US and for a week. He's spending some time meeting clients. And he said, you know what, I would like, to set up meetings with, 10 different fellow members, and I made the introduction. He's going to really make the most out of his visit. And don't do random. Be organized, be responsive, put yourself out there, and you will be successful. This is an amazing market. And one thing I want to pick up that Ari said earlier, don't necessarily tackle the United States in its entirety. May not be the way to go. You may want to check, expand into California, expand into Arizona, depending on where your market research is driving you. Don't tackle the US market all at once. That's just foolish to do that. But Ari and Ani, do you want to have a last word before we wrap up?
Annie, do you want to go?
Well, I think I already said I liked people to reach out to me. When I'm away, for example, again, in July, I'm not going to be, I believe in having a real office. I believe in meeting people. I believe in brainstorming with clients, brainstorming with colleagues. However, when I'm away, and I will be away in July, I am very happy if my clients call me. When my clients call me and say, I'm so sorry, I'm reaching out to you. And I said, no, I'm very happy that you reach out to me. I'm not going to be serene when I'm away if I don't think that my client can reach me if they have any emergency, if I can be helpful to them. And I want to be part of their organization. I want to make them feel that I'm their face in America, and I'm their ally if there is any problem. So please reach out to me. Reach out to me if you want to meet me the first time, or know that this is going to be what I want, the way I like the relationship to be, whether I'm in Timbuktu or I'm in my office in New York City.
All
Ari?
I have to say is that I really enjoy what I do. It's been a pleasure to work in that manner for the last 2 decades. I mean, corporate America, before that, was a learning experience. But if you're asking, and that's where I cut my teeth really and learn what I do in various aspects. But if you ask me what's happening these days, I every day get up with full of energy because I just enjoy helping companies and people. And ever since I started to work mainly with external companies coming to the US, it's been a great pleasure. I'm together with Ani on the thought process of meeting face to face, and just wanted to also share, I didn't think about it. At any given time, I have 4 associates in Europe someplace, either in France, Slovenia, Switzerland, and other places. So I also extend an invitation for you to reach out. Maybe it won't be specific me. It will be one of my folks that is on the ground there that can meet and talk. So you're welcome to do the same. And I want to thank you very much for having me here on this occasion.
Thank you, Ari. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's very rewarding to work in this space, to help companies, expand into the US. And the EACC, in my role, we work with companies from the US expanding into Europe, looking for partners into Europe, and with European companies expanding into the US, like companies like you. And it's very rewarding. It's so interesting, what these companies do, and it's fantastic when they grow into a new market, and when they have the guts to do so. I mean, you meet amazing people, and I have to say, I mean, I said it earlier, we're renewing our EEN partnership. It's been very rewarding because we met amazing companies who want to expand their business activities, and we can only encourage everybody to do that. And we invite people to reach out to us if you have any questions, and if you just want to have a conversation. I mean, just Ani and Ari said the same thing. Just give us a call, and we can talk to you. We're happy to talk to you. We can work with you and help you think it through, because that's the most important thing. Get yourself mentally ready. Think it through. Have a plan. Get yourself ready. And with that, I hand back to...
We're here to help.
We're here to help. Exactly. Thomas, back to you.
Well, back to me. Thanks. Everything has been said. Thank you so much to the panelists, to the speakers, and well, have a nice afternoon for you also, I guess, in the United States. And thank you for following this webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.